in a quiet village in London. There lived a wealthy widow named Mrs. Darcy. Her late husband had been a successful businessman, leaving her with considerable fortune. She had one daughter, Hazel, a talented and beautiful girl whom she loved dearly. Mrs. Darcy always gave Hazel everything she desired, never realizing how spoiled her daughter had become over the years. But time passed quickly, and one evening Mrs. Darcy looked at Hazel and realized she was no longer a child, but an 18-year-old woman ready for marriage. Following tradition, Mrs. Darcy arranged for Hazel to marry a young man from a wealthy family in a neighboring village. She began preparing everything for the wedding with great care, including property and money that Hazel would take to her new home. For her special gift, Mrs. Darcy went to the finest store in the village to order a wedding box covered in bright blue silk with a lion sewn on top. According to tradition, such a box would bless the marriage with a strong and intelligent son. However, pleasing Hazel proved nearly impossible. When the family servant brought the first box home, Hazel rejected it immediately, complaining that the lion design was wrong. The second box had colors to light. The third was also refused. Finally, the exhausted servant cried out that he could no longer endure the ridicule at the store and threatened to leave the family. Though spoiled, Hazel wasn't heartless. She felt sorry for the loyal old servant who had served the family since before her birth, so she agreed to keep the box. The wedding day arrived on the 18th of the 6th month. Hazel felt both excited and sad as she prepared to leave her mother. Dressed in a beautiful white silk gown, she was placed in the traditional wedding chair with curtains drawn around her. 4 strong men would carry her to her husband's home. Mrs. Darcy lifted the curtain one last time and handed Hazel the wedding box, but Hazel barely listened, lost in thoughts about the husband she had never met. As the men carried her along the main road, heavy rain began to fall. The road became a river of mud, forcing them to take shelter. Annoyed by the delay, Hazel heard someone crying nearby. Peering through her curtain, she saw another wedding chair beside hers, old and shabby with torn curtains. The crying came from inside. Irritated and worried about bad luck, Hazel sent her servant to investigate. The servant returned with news that the girl was weeping because she was poor and had nothing to bring to her new home. Hazel's heart softened. She realized how fortunate she had been, while this girl had nothing. Without knowing what precious gifts her mother had placed inside, Hazel gave the wedding box to the crying bride, instructing her servant not to reveal who had sent it. The crying stopped, and when the rain ended, Hazel continued to her new home. She married a wonderful, handsome man, and 2 years later, they had a healthy baby boy. Hazel felt like the happiest woman alive. 8 years later, disaster struck. A devastating flood destroyed their home and everything they owned, separated from her husband and son. Hazel traveled with other refugees to a town called Greenwich. The journey was long and brutal, and Hazel feared she would never see her family again. Life in Greenwich was harsh. One day, exhausted and alone, Hazel learned that a wealthy businessman named Harry Lee was distributing food to flood victims. She joined the long line, holding her plate and fighting back tears of humiliation. When her turn finally came, the servant gave her the last portion and announced there was no more food. The person behind Hazel began to cry. Turning around, Hazel saw an elderly woman who reminded her of her own mother. Without hesitation, she poured her food into the woman's plate and walked away, tears streaming down her face. The servant witnessed this act of selflessness and ran after her. Impressed by her kindness, he offered her a job caring for Harry Lee's young son. His wife was seriously ill and needed help. Hazel accepted gratefully, but Harry warned her never to enter the small house at the end of the garden, his wife's private sanctuary. Hazel soon discovered that Harry's son was terribly spoiled, reminding her painfully of her own childhood behavior. One day, while playing in the garden, the boy's ball rolled into the forbidden house. Despite Hazel's protests, the child screamed until she relented. She slipped inside to retrieve the ball and froze. There, on a small table, among old photographs and books, sat her wedding box. Overwhelmed by memories of her mother's love, her wedding day, and her lost family, Hazel began to cry. Suddenly, a hand touched her shoulder. She turned to face Mrs. Lee's angry expression. Through tears, Hazel explained about the boy's ball and confessed that the box was hers. Given away on her wedding day, Mrs. Lee's anger transformed into shock. After questioning Hazel about her past, Mrs. Lee fell to her knees, weeping with joy. Mrs. Lee revealed that she was the poor bride who had received the box that rainy day. The precious emerald inside had allowed her and her husband to start the business that made them wealthy. She had bought back the emerald and kept it in the box, praying for years to find her mysterious benefactor and give thanks. That very day, Harry Lee sent servants to search for Hazel's missing family. They were found safely, and the two families became inseparable friends, sharing their lives and fortunes. As Hazel grew old, she often told the story of the wedding box, always ending with the same words. Remember, life moves in circles, and happiness comes to those who help others. The small act of kindness she had shown on her wedding day, when she had everything, had returned to save her when she had nothing. The wedding box had completed its journey, proving that generosity and compassion create bonds that time and hardship cannot break.